So my name's Jonathon Hunyor. I'm the CEO of the Public Interest Advocacy Centre. Thanks very much for the invitation to speak to you here on Gadigal land. What I'd like to do in my opening comments, and I'll keep them quite brief, is just to focus on the distinct role that PAC plays in the justice system and to highlight the concerns that we have that the distinct value that we think we add, and that I think our record shows that we add, isn't lost in the current funding and policy paradigms. So a major focus of PAC's work is addressing injustice through systemic change. And
can I just ask if you can just direct the microphone towards you?
Sure, I'm sorry.
That's
Would
it.
you like me looking this way or towards
You can look at
yourself? Okay, thank you. So a major focus of our work is addressing injustice and disadvantage through systemic change, and we try to use strategic litigation and test cases and policy advocacy that we link to our legal work to bring about what we hope are sustainable outcomes for the benefit of the marginalised, for the disadvantaged and the vulnerable, and often the powerless. As you would probably be aware, the main document that's guiding funding of legal assistance services, which includes the legal aid commissions and community legal centres in particular, is the National Partnership Agreement on Legal Assistance Services. And this has got an understandable and well-justified and well-intentioned focus on making sure that legal services are being delivered for the benefit of people with the greatest need. But one of the things that we think is important at PAC is that the work we do and the value we add to the legal profession and the justice system isn't overlooked and undervalued by taking an unduly narrow approach to how the goals of the MPA are achieved. In particular, the MPA talks of services being delivered to priority clients and being delivered to people experiencing financial disadvantage. And indeed, a significant component of PAC's work and that of many of the community legal centres is on delivering service to priority clients. At PAC, we run the Homeless Persons Legal Service, which is our largest project and is coordinates a network of about 430 pro bono lawyers to provide a much needed service to people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. But this delivery of services directly to priority clients is not necessarily the same as our work in strategic litigation. When we look at a strategic issue, we're looking at the issue and the potential benefit to disadvantaged, marginalised, vulnerable people, and not necessarily the individual client or their individual disadvantage. So when we take on a case concerning accessible public transport, for example, we're doing so for the benefit of all people with a disability, and not just our immediate client, who may or may not be especially disadvantaged. And indeed, with strategic litigation, you're often looking for someone who has resilience and the willingness to take up a big fight, which limits the pool of people from whom you can choose. And similarly, we're concerned that funding formulas and that attempt to measure whether the needs of disadvantaged clients are being met will tend to focus on the physical location of service providers and their clients. And again, in general, there's sense for this, and it does make sense on one level. And again, our Homeless Persons Legal Service makes a point of operating across the Greater Sydney region and in Newcastle to make sure we're accessible and accessing our clients. But again, for PAC's strategic work, what matters more is the reach of our results and our ability to effectively tackle issues that impact upon people facing disadvantage, and not where our service is delivered or where our clients necessarily live. So we're concerned that the goals of the MPA are understood broadly and not literally, and that appropriate value is given to work that's delivered for the benefit of priority clients, priority client groups and people experiencing financial disadvantage, and not simply in the communities where those people are found. And finally, it's also critical there's recognition of the way in which strategic advocacy meets otherwise unmet legal needs and prevents legal problems arising. So the NPA again talks of providing services to, and I quote, help people identify their legal problems and facilitate the resolution of those problems in a timely manner before they escalate. And again, in our individual casework with HPLS, we do just this. We help identify individual legal problems, we help to resolve them early. But in our strategic litigation, we're often engaged in trying to prevent other people from having the same problem as our immediate client, and to resolve the underlying issues that can give rise to legal need before even people even have a legal problem. So the intent is aligned in many ways with the NPA goals, but we need to understand them broadly and flexibly if we're going to try to capture the value that we add. And PAC again links our strategic litigation with our advocacy work, where we seek non-legal remedies for underlying legal problems. So our ability to work with stakeholders, to work with government, to try to get the sort of results that will benefit disadvantaged people. And again, we're keen to make sure that the value of that is not lost. These are all hard things to quantify, but they are critical in recognising the distinctive role that organisations like PAC plays in providing effective and efficient legal assistance and in supporting access to justice, and we think they're critical when we look at the future of the legal profession and innovative approaches to try to ensure that the system is a fair and just one. So thank you.
Thank you. The federal government has announced a funding cut to community legal centres from July of next year.
Yes.
Will that impact on PAC and the homeless persons legal services, and if it will impact, how?
Well, the funding cut is a very dramatic one. It's 25%. So contrary to the Productivity Commission's recommendation that $200 million additional in additional funding is needed just to maintain existing frontline services, the community legal centres are facing a significant cut. And a colleague remarked to me, in fact, that today I think is the day of endangered species, marking the day that the thylacine and the Tasmanian tiger became extinct. So I thought that possibly augured poorly for the future of community legal centres in the face of what we're talking about as being a funding cliff. It's too early for us to say what impact that's going to have, because the decisions about how the funding is to be distributed are going to be made by Legal Aid, and they're still working through how that will go. But there is no doubt that a number of centres are going to face significant cuts. We are led to believe that there will be services that will have to close or merge. And we're very concerned at PAC that it's going to impact both on our ability to deliver those frontline services and that sort of transactional work to homeless people that we think is so effective, both in meeting their needs but also in playing a very important role in leveraging pro bono support. So for the about $500,000 that we receive to do the homeless person's legal service, we estimate that we leverage about $2 million in pro bono support. And we think that's a wonderful testament to the strength of the pro bono community and the contribution made by our pro bono partners, but we also think it shows the effectiveness of that sort of model. We're trying to make that sustainable by seeking contributions from the pro bono firms, a financial contribution towards running it, but still the funding for that is not something that we can count on, and it is something that will be very much under the razor when the cuts come into effect.
Are you seeing an increased demand for services through HPLS?
I think it's fair to say that if we build it, they'll come. If we doubled the size and the scope and the reach, we would be able to keep everyone fully busy. There's been an increase in homelessness in the inner city. I think it was about 12% in the last 12 months, or in the last 12 months I think it was. But there was a recent street count that showed that homelessness is actually increasing in the city region. And the demand for those services is always very strong. And as I say, if we could double the size and reach, I'm confident that we would continue to keep everyone very busy. It is the sort of service whereby when we're present, that's what allows people to come forward. When we're able to reach into other community services and we try to co-locate with other community services so that we're available and accessible, that's what gives people who are homeless the opportunity to come forward with their problems and help us try to find a solution for them.
Could you just briefly describe how HPLS works and the type of legal problems that it has to deal with? Sure.
So we coordinate a roster of about 430 volunteers. We link with, I think now 15 locations across the Greater Sydney region and including Newcastle. And we're generally co-located with other services, drop-in centres, places that are providing meals for homeless people, and those sort of places where we know people already go who are homeless and seeking assistance, so that we are able to take referrals from staff there. We're able to meet people who turn up from time to time. There needs to be a bit of flexibility in how we go about that, recognising the reality of the lives of people who are homeless. Some services operate on a drop-in model, others have an appointment based model. But the types of issues we deal with are varied. There is a focus on tenancy issues for people who may be about to experience homelessness or are keen to get into a home. We want to avoid people losing tenancies and becoming homeless. We want to get people back into stable housing. We also have a lot of people who've got issues with debts that they may be facing, or fines that are outstanding, who want to try to clear those debts and work those sort of things off. We often have issues around Centrelink and people who may have issues there, and then there's a whole range of other sort of civil law things, as well as criminal law. And part of our homeless persons legal service is to have a dedicated criminal lawyer, so that when people come and see us, we can deal with their cluster of legal issues, and we don't have to send them off for that, because often that results in them not turning up, falling between the cracks, having to repeat their story. So if we can have that within the service, we've found that to be a very effective way of making sure that we're meeting the needs of homeless people, and often those with mental illness and mental impairment issues, often diverting them from the justice system and avoiding the often undesirable consequences that go with that.
What happens to those people that you can't provide assistance to? Where do they go?
Well, we try to make referrals to other agencies that can be assisted, but often people just are unable to get get assistance. So we make referrals, obviously, to some of the specialist CLCs that deal with issues like welfare rights or with tenancy issues. We obviously make referrals to legal aid commissions or the Aboriginal Legal Service. So it's a very well-connected group of agencies that try to work very closely together. But there are often clients that we can't assist.
Jonathon, you made reference to having 430 volunteer lawyers, which initially I thought was a lot, and then I thought there's an awful lot more than 430
Yes.
lawyers in the profession. Leaving aside the question of funding, could one of the solutions be for you, for solicitors such as myself, to have some form of compulsory pro bono that we need to do as part of our, whether it's our ongoing legal training or whether to continue to receive our practice certificate every year? Would that be something that would be of help to people in positions like yourself?
Look, I think I'm not sure, to be honest. I think making it compulsory has the danger that people aren't going to really want to be there, and they aren't going to give it the commitment it requires. One of the things about pro bono is when it's done well, you're able to get marginalised and disadvantaged people access to the best lawyers in town, and you can have a disadvantaged client who's got as good a lawyer as Gina Reinhardt through a pro bono. I took a case to the High Court last year where we had a legal team pro bono that was as good as anyone could ask for, and that was a very empowering experience for me. I was at the time with an Aboriginal legal service in Darwin, and that was a wonderful feeling to be able to provide that level of service and to know that our client had that great level. But a lot of that comes from the commitment of those lawyers and the drive. I'd be worried if it was compulsory, you wouldn't get that same commitment, and that the work would fall to the bottom of the pile. Lawyers are very, very busy, and those in private practice have other things they need to attend to. So that when pro bono doesn't work is when it's treated as something that's kind of at the bottom of the pile. When it works is when that person is treated as a client just as any other and is given that attention, and the firms that do pro bono well do it very, very well, and it's a wonderful contribution. With something like the Homeless Persons Legal Service, if we had money that would allow us to supervise and expand the reach of a service like that, I think we'd be able to find pro bono lawyers who would do that. I think there is a lot of goodwill, and certainly when I've called around with issues that I've sought pro bono help for in the past, I've never found capacity to be a problem. So particular firms may be unable to assist, a conflict or no capacity, but there's a very good network people can ring around, and I've never had an issue that was a genuine pro bono issue which warranted, had merit for support, go begging because of a lack of capacity. So I think there's definitely scope to use that more. I'm not sure that compulsory in that way would quite get the result, but I'd be interested to hear from commercial corporate lawyers as to whether they think differently.
Thank you.
Does the HPLS only use volunteer lawyers, or do you use law students as well?
We do have PLT placements with our service, and they provide a great benefit to us. We have a number of lawyers on staff who run and coordinate and supervise the practice. They work with PLT. The difficulty with those placements is providing enough supervision. Unless people can come and devote at least a month, but generally 6 weeks up full time, it's very hard to get them up to speed and find that is really a return on the investment. We recognise that there's a really great role for legal centres, and I think it's something the CLC sector does very, very well and is again underappreciated, is that role as a training ground. And the role that something like HPLS plays as a training ground for those pro bono lawyers who come. They can get their hands on the sort of issues, the sort of skills that they would never get elsewhere. I had someone recently say to me, you come and do a stint as a secondee at a community legal centre, and you'll get skills that you won't get in a law firm, because you'll have to be hands-on doing the whole matter. You're not just going to be able to do a bit of it. You're going to have to draft things up. You're going to have to do the affidavits. You're going to have to do the pleadings. And so that was good feedback to receive there, and I think that's a great contribution that is made. And we obviously benefit from that, but it needs to have a certain level of commitment and a certain level of skill from the people that we're receiving to make it valuable.